All right, today we're diving into a pretty fascinating piece of research. It tackles a huge problem in the world of beekeeping. How do you keep honeybee queens safe and healthy all the way through a long, cold winter? So, what you're looking at here, well, it's pretty much a bee nursery for royalty. You've got dozens of queen bees, each in her own tiny little chamber, and they're about to be stored for 8 long months. Now the big questions are, right? Why would anyone even do this? And how on earth can they possibly survive?
Okay, to really understand the why, we need to talk about a critical bottleneck in the beekeeping calendar. It's called the spring queen shortage. And for beekeepers in colder climates, believe me, it is a massive headache. And here's the reason why, boiled down to one stark number: 28%. Since 2007, beekeepers in Canada have lost, on average, 28% of their colonies every single winter. I mean, think about that. That means when spring finally arrives, they're in this desperate race to replace all those losses. And to do that, they need thousands and thousands of new, healthy queens.
But here's the dilemma, right? The peak demand for all these queens, it happens in early spring. But the weather is still way too cold and unpredictable to raise new queens locally. Nature just isn't ready yet.
So the current solution is to import queens from warmer places, like California, Hawaii, or even Australia. But that is a really risky business. I mean, you can accidentally bring in unwanted genetics, like more aggressive Africanized bees, which are, well, they're known for being highly defensive. Or you could spread exotic pests and parasites, even treatment-resistant diseases. On top of all that, the stress of shipping itself can seriously mess with a queen's fertility. Oh, and yeah, the prices are always going up.
So what if there was a local solution? This is what brings us to the idea of banking queens. The concept is simple enough. You raise a bunch of extra local queens in the late summer, and then you just store them over the winter. It's a brilliant idea, really, but it has always had one deadly flaw. Yeah, you can think of it like a queen bee hibernation hotel. You check in hundreds of healthy, mated queens in the fall, and then you check them out in the spring, ready to go. The concept sounds simple, right? But the execution, well, that's proven to be incredibly difficult. And the reason it's so difficult really comes down to this one critical bee behavior: the winter cluster. See, to survive the cold, worker bees huddle up into this super tight ball. They vibrate their flight muscles to generate heat and keep the very center of that cluster warm. Now, this huddle, it's a brilliant survival strategy for the colony as a whole. But for a banked queen who's stuck in a cage in one spot, it can be a death sentence. As the bees eat their honey stores, the whole cluster slowly moves through the hive. And if that cluster moves away from those caged queens, they're abandoned in the cold, and they freeze to death. Simple as that.
So this is the problem that researchers André Rousseau and Pierre Giovinazzo set out to solve. They designed this really elegant experiment to see if they could use science to outsmart a bee's ancient winter instincts.
And they did this at a serious scale. I mean, they raised 600 queens. They placed them into 15 massive banking colonies, each with about 40,000 bees. And then they moved these bee hotels into environmentally controlled rooms for the whole winter, all to test one single critical variable: temperature.
All right, so the first group was the control. They were kept at 6 degrees Celsius. Now, that's the standard temperature most beekeepers use for wintering their colonies indoors. So this is our baseline. The second group was kept a little bit warmer, at 11 degrees Celsius. The question here was, would a moderate temperature bump make a difference? At this temperature, the bees would still definitely need to form a cluster to stay warm. And then we had the crucial test group. This one was kept at 16 degrees Celsius. The whole hypothesis was that 16 degrees might just be the magic number, the sweet spot. It's theoretically just warm enough that the bees don't have to trigger that ancient instinct to huddle together for survival, and if they don't form that tight moving ball, they won't abandon the caged queens.
So after 8 long months, we're talking from September all the way to April, the researchers finally opened up the hives to see what happened. And the results, honestly, they're stunning. It's not just a small difference, it's a massive leap. So in the standard 6 degree and 11 degree rooms, survival was just over 55%. Now, not bad, but not great either. But in that 16 degree room, wow, the survival rate was dramatically higher. Let's just focus on that number for a second. 86.3%. After 8 months in storage, nearly 9 out of 10 queens survived. This is an absolute game changer of a result. It proves that the clustering behavior was, in fact, the critical factor all along.
But survival is only half the battle, right? I mean, a queen who's been cooped up in a tiny cage for 8 months might be alive, but is she still a superstar? Is she healthy? Is she fertile? Is she ready to lead a colony of tens of thousands of bees?
So, what happened next is really the crucial point. The researchers took all those surviving queens and introduced them into new colonies. And the acceptance rates were excellent right across the board. The queens from that successful 16-degree group, they were successfully introduced 88% of the time. That pretty much proves they were still viable.
And for the final test, they looked at fertility right down to the microscopic level. They actually examined sperm viability, which is basically the percentage of a queen's stored sperm that's still alive and can fertilize eggs. And this quote from the study, it just says it all. Viability stayed high, and there was no real difference between the banked queens and queens who wintered normally. The bottom line? That long storage hadn't harmed their reproductive potential one bit. So, let's just put this all together. A simple temperature change leads to a huge increase in survival, and the queens that make it through are healthy and fertile. This is so much more than just a scientific curiosity. This could literally mean a new future for bees.
I mean, this technique offers a solution to all the problems we talked about at the beginning. It gives beekeepers a reliable, local supply of queens right when they need them most. It slashes the risks and costs of having to import them, and it helps preserve local bee genetics, the ones that are perfectly adapted to the regional climate. It's an incredibly powerful new tool for their toolkit.
And you know, this isn't just a story about bees and beekeepers. Securing healthy local bee populations is absolutely fundamental to our own food supply. So many of the foods we love and enjoy every single day, from the apples in your lunch to the almonds in your granola, they depend directly on these incredible pollinators.
Which really leaves us with a powerful final thought. After all these years of struggling with such a complex problem, involving biology, climate, logistics, the whole shebang, the answer might have been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Just think about that. Could a simple thermostat setting actually help secure the future of our food?